All right. G'day, Ed. How are you, mate?
Hey, good day, buddy. Good to see you, man, again. Are you awake now? Did you have your coffee yet?
I'm good. I've got the full cup of Joe right next to me here, and I'm good to go. You know, my missus said to me yesterday, you said you're going to do it a little bit earlier tomorrow. What time is it? And I said, I'm going to get up at 4:30. I'll do all my prep, and we'll be live at 5:30. And she was like, "Sheesh, you're keen on a Saturday morning doing that?" And I'm like, well, you know, if you want to be a news anchor and you want to be on television, you got to create your own TV show and make your own way in the world, and it's happening for me. You know, like if that's where you start, isn't it? At the bottom of the barrel on breakfast television, something like that, some ridiculous.
Well, your discipline is inspiring. So I mean, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of sad for me because I don't have any excuse now. Because you're gonna throw, hey man, I get up at 4:30 in the morning, so don't complain. I can't complain about anything now.
You better be there at 3:30 in the afternoon, pal. Otherwise, I'm going to scrub it completely. That's what it is. All right, let's get into today's show, Ed.
I got a question for you before we get started.
Sure.
This has been on my mind now for a while. I keep meaning to ask you, but I keep forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're a naval veteran. You spent a lot of your life on ships.
Yep.
So why the hell did they call it, port and starboard? Why don't they just call it right and left?
That wouldn't be any fun. Then it wouldn't be nautical. Yeah, and people always miss the other one, forward and aft, as well. Yeah,
well,
and then you got the forecastle and the stern, or the forecastle and the flight deck. They're the different things that you have. And then you have, when you go outside on the side of the ship, you go out and on the waist. Yeah, so everything has its own little name and its own little nuance like that. You still get confused with port and starboard?
Yeah, I never bothered to. I'm sure there's a trick to remembering which is which, but no, I don't.
There's always a little bit of port left in the glass.
Oh, okay, very good.
Port's left. Yeah, you won't ever forget it when you do it like that. There's always a little bit of port left.
Yep, very good. Very good. Okay, that's my trick now. Okay, sorry, man. Go ahead.
Let's get into today's show. Let's have a little bit of fun, and off we go. So today we're going to be covering the meeting that went ahead in Ramstein. We're going to talk about de-dollarisation and inflation and cash, how that's being outlawed and what's going on with that. And we're going to close out today's show talking about some idiot Australian politicians that will just, for an American like you, you'll just be absolutely gobsmacked by that. But I'm certain that you're probably not going to be too surprised by the behavior of these people. But ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't followed us on the various other platforms, I encourage you to do that. First of all, like and subscribe here on YouTube. And we've got the podcast of this show up and live on Spotify. I got that live yesterday, so the first episode is up. And I just repurposed the Go All In show, and it's now called The Unspoken Truth. So if you just search for that on Spotify, it'll show right up, and it's pulled into Apple Podcasts as well. We've got a new Twitter account called Unspoken Truth AU. That was the only handle I could get. And we're also over on Telegram and Rumble. And all of the links are right down in the description. So make sure you at least come on over and grab the podcast in Spotify and come on over to Telegram as well, because I'll be posting everything over there in case something ever happens to our YouTube video. I'm not going to remind you of that announcement on every show, but as we get going here with this new program, I will be sharing some of that stuff with you as well. So we've got a jam-packed show today. There's a lot going on. And there's a lot happening. Ed, have you got something you want to add here in the introduction, or do you just want to dive straight into your segment, mate?
Yeah, something real quick. I want to give a special shout out again to my WhatsApp group. I got a lot of wonderful friends there in the Hey Ed WhatsApp group. And if any of you out there think you would like to join the Hey Ed WhatsApp group, just shoot us an email here, and I'll be happy to send you a link to that group. That group is full of wonderful people all around the world, and we all have the same role of one mind, and that is to secure our personal sovereignty in every way we can. And we look at certain programs to help us do that. It's just a great group of people. So special shout out to my friends in my Hey Ed WhatsApp group. Hey guys.
Hey everybody, and thank you for your support and your kind comments. We really appreciate that as well. So, all right, without further ado, Ed, let's throw you straight into, what are you talking about here first up?
I'm talking about de-dollarization. Actually, de-dollarization and how it relates to inflation. So I should have titled it De-Dollarization and Inflation, but it gets kind of wordy. So de-dollarization, the word of the day. There you go.
Over to you, mate.
All right. So there are some things going on in the world right now that everyone needs to be aware of that most people are still not aware of. And one of the most important things is a phenomenon going on right now called de-dollarisation. And it's kind of a buzzword right now on YouTube. If you do a YouTube search, it's just now starting to become a popular topic. But I've been talking about it for over a year. Now, what I mean by de-dollarization is you have to remember that the U.S. dollar excuse me, the U.S. dollar has enjoyed the world reserve currency status for almost a decade. And we've been taking advantage of what's called the petrodollar for almost 50 years, since 1971. And that's given America a lot of power over that time. America has largely grown in its power and its prestige through the use of the U.S. dollar. And so the U.S. dollar has been vital to the strength and the prestige of America for decades, many decades. Well, now there are many countries right now that are starting to turn away from the U.S. dollar as a world reserve currency, and they're starting to do their international trade outside of the U.S. dollar. I'm going to show you a few clips here, and then I'm going to tie it all together for you at the end of the clip.
Inflation in the United States has hit 4 decades high. Lower income households face the worst of the crisis.
In May, inflation hit 8.6%, the highest in 40 years.
Venezuela are now worth next to nothing due to the sky-high levels of inflation.
Venezuela, of course, a country where prices double every few weeks.
1923 was disastrous for Germany. In that year, the great German inflation reached its peak. To meet this crisis and pay the strikers in the Ruhr, the government simply printed more money. Millions, whatever figure was printed on the notes, really meant nothing. The German mark was worthless.
If the same amount of goods existed in the economy, but there was twice as much money, then we would think that the price of everything would double.
The infusion of cash into the financial system has renewed concerns that inflation could surge.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did.
The dollar is facing a revolt. The world knows it as the king of currencies, but the dominance of the dollar is now under threat. More and more countries are looking for alternatives, and China's yuan is emerging as a clear challenger. Beijing is pursuing a string of deals. The latest one is with Brazil. Brazil and China are ditching the dollar. From now on, they'll use their own currencies for trade. And why are these trends significant? Because currencies drive commerce. The dollar's dominance gives the US an outsized influence on the global economy, and a shift away from the dollar will only hurt America. The Saudis are leaning towards Russia and China. On oil production, Saudi Arabia sided with Russia rather than America. On the truce with Iran, it has chosen China over America.
Those of you who are holding dollars, you surely might go into losses. You better do what you must do, because this market is going to be different in a couple of weeks.
The US dollar is officially over, or at least it will be very soon if certain countries have their way. Some of the world's most powerful nations have formed an alliance.
Last week, China and Brazil reached an agreement to settle trades in one another's currency. Over the past 15 years, China has replaced the US as the main trading partner of resource-rich Brazil, and as such, that shift may have been inevitable. But within the context of recent events, this appears to be another in a series of recent challenges to the central role of the dollar in global trade.
Okay, there are many things that has made America great and made us separate from any other kind of country in the world. But at the core of our prosperity over the past century has been the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar has been the dominant currency in the world, and we have reaped the benefits of it. We have grown to be the richest and most powerful country in the world, largely because of the dollar. Well, the long knives are out for the U.S. dollar, and literally the currencies you have sitting in your wallet, in your sock drawer, in your bank, right, they're at risk of being extinct. Right? They're not at risk of being extinct. I think it is in the cards. They are going to go away. So let me paint the picture here for you, okay? 10 years ago, 72% of currencies held in reserves by central banks around the world were U.S. dollars. Now that figure is down to 59%. Okay, we're still the world's reserve currency, but not by much. Now, A lot of people will tell you this is through incompetence by our leaders, and others will tell you that this is by design. Okay, well, whether it is by design or whether it is through incompetence, it is happening. Now, it is a fact that the U.S. has used the U.S. dollar as a weapon, as a tool, as a way to punish our enemies and to make people do what we wanted them to do. But now the resentment by the world's countries are surfacing, and they're starting to push back, largely in the form of this BRICS alliance. Now, BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But there's a lot more than just those countries. There's really BRICS plus. And what they're doing is they're getting together to form an alternative to the U.S. dollar. So as these countries start announcing that they're going to start doing deals outside of the U.S. dollars, those U.S. dollars that are being held in reserves, they're going to come flooding back to America. And when that happens, that's when we're going to see hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is coming. What would you do if in a very short period of time, your cost of living doubles, but at the same time, your income does not double? It actually goes down. What would your life look like? Look, we could, in theory, end up being a third world country if things keep going the way they're going. It's not that difficult. Just destroy the currency. As a matter of fact, there's a famous quote by Vladimir Lenin: the best way to destroy the capitalist system is to debauch the currency. Well, that is exactly what we have been doing. We've been printing money at an unbelievable exponential rate over the past few years, and that is unsustainable. That is destroying the value of our dollars. It is being done by our politicians and by our Federal Reserve. It is being done to our dollar. Your U.S. dollar, anything you have denominated in U.S. dollars, is going to be going down in value. Now, if the U.S. dollar were to go the way of the Weimar Republic and become basically worthless, that's it. That's the end of civilization in America. Forget being a world power. We're going to have a hard time just keeping our population fed with roofs over their heads. Okay, there are some stark images here that I want to show you that kind of illustrate what I'm talking about how foreign countries are getting together to do business outside of the U.S. dollar. Look at this image. Now, this is the video of the King of Saudi Arabia and Vladimir Putin. Look how happy they are. Look at those smiles. That's not a good thing. Saudi Arabia has started making deals with Russia and China to sell their oil outside of the U.S. currency. The petrodollar is dead. And the petrodollar has been largely the source of our wealth over the past 50 years plus. Now, what drove Saudi Arabia to start making deals outside of the USA? It's things like this. This is a clip from Joe Biden when he was running for president, talking about how he's going to punish Saudi Arabia.
And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
Okay, so you're the king of Saudi Arabia, and this is what you hear from the U.S. president. So Saudi Arabia says, you know what, America, we don't need you. If you don't want to honor your relationship with us, that's fine. We'll just turn around and make deals with everyone else in the world, like Russia, like China. Let me superimpose those two video images, okay, showing Joe Biden talking about how much he hates Saudi Arabia, right next to the picture of the king of Saudi Arabia with Vladimir Putin. I think this kind of, in a very neat few-second clip, demonstrates exactly what is going on in the world.
And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
So our administration, these people should be in jail. They should be in prison for what they've done to our country. The left is destroying America, and largely on purpose. These people are globalists. They hate America. They don't like America. They don't like the principles of America. And you know what? They're winning. They're achieving their ends. They are debasing our U.S. currency. And other countries that up to now are considered our allies are looking to join BRICS. Take a look at this headline. China settles first LNG trade in yuan in latest hit of the dollar. That's referring to France. France signed a deal with China to buy natural gas in the Chinese yuan instead of the U.S. dollar. And here again, Europe must resist pressure to become America's followers. So here we are, France, who's supposed to be a close ally of America, saying, you know what? Screw you. China's starting to look pretty good. Listen.
Hey, Ed, can you hear us, mate? We can't hear you there.
Oh, sorry about that.
You were muted. Maybe just go back to what you were saying there.
Okay, so let's talk about the consequences here of the countries starting to turn their backs on America. Well, not America, well, on the U.S. dollar, right? And in effect, America. Let's face it, America has been kind of a bully here for an awful long time, and we've been getting our way largely through the use of the U.S. dollar. And countries are now starting to say, you know what? Hey, we have alternatives. And if we don't have an alternative, we'll create an alternative. And that's why they're turning toward the BRICS nations. So the net effect of that to America will be, as all these U.S. dollars do not need to be held in reserve in all these central banks around the world, those dollars are going to come back to us. They're going to say, well, we don't need to keep all that money in our vault. We'll just send it back to America. We don't need it. Well, as they do that, that's where hyperinflation will start kicking in, because there's value in scarcity, right? That's why, vintage cars are so valuable. Well, when you have more of something, it's less valuable. So that's why inflation, look, it's not going to get better. People, it's going to get worse. So de-dollarization, it is a real thing, and it does affect us directly. And I don't know, we're going to need some pretty clever people to put their thumb in this particular dike, because I think the castle kind of died. The momentum is starting to shift away from the U.S. dollar as a world's reserve currency. Okay, so Rob, you want to come in here and give me what do you think about what I just said?
Yeah, man. You took the easy route today and used your content from your channel. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already subscribed over at the Hey Ed YouTube channel, make sure you scroll down and have a look at the show notes and click over there, because Ed does some fantastic videos. And we've been doing this for a little while now, and we decided to pony up and do it together, which is really actually very good. But you got some amazing content over there. And that montage that you put together, I looked at it and was like, oh my God, that's like 9 minutes. That's a lot of content there, Ed. But it just shows you over and over and over again what's actually happening. And what it actually does is, for me personally, it reminds me that I'm focusing on all the wrong things and you're not really listening. There's so much going on in the world. What does the Kenyan president know that we don't? Oh my God. The guy came out and spoke the truth. And he said that something really bad is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. So something radical is around the corner. My feeling is that we're going to see a decoupling and a deglobalization, and something that happens to the American economy in the next 6 to 9 months. And that's going to radically shift our world economy forever. And it's not going to come back. It's not going to be anything like pre-2019. Everything up until 2019, that was the best of humanity so far. And everything between now and about 2040, I suspect, is going to be some really, really hard times ahead. And as I was watching that video there, I was thinking about you and me, Ed. We've known each other for a couple of years now, and we've had these conversations a lot, sometimes for 2 and 3 hours at a time, just chatting, not recording, just chatting. And it kind of made me ask the question, 30, 40 years ago, were people having these conversations? Were there two guys that were mates at work and they'd get together after work over a beer and talk about geopolitics and the end of the American financial system and the end of the US dollar? No. If you cast your mind back to when you got into Wall Street in 1987, they were like boom times in the 1980s, absolute boom times. And I remember my dad, he was an investor in the stock market, and he was always reading the newspaper and, trying to pick the next stock and all those sorts of things. And I never remember my dad saying anything bad like the economy is going to end, the dollar's going to go away, we're decoupling, there's BRICS, Russia and Saudi Arabia are ponying up, and MBS and Putin are the best mates in the world. It's like really strange time in history. And I think part of what you do, correct me if I'm wrong here, Ed, part of what you do is you're kind of waking people up. like, wake up. You know, it's that Homer Simpson, he's got Bart around the neck and he's shaking him, right? And it's like, wake up. Don't you realize what's going on? Can't you see you need to do something to protect yourself? Get out of the banks, get some gold and silver, and get yourself into some passive recurring income streams that are reliant on big tech, because big tech ain't going away anytime soon. I was having a conversation with one of my clients yesterday, and I didn't know him to be a prepper. He's a British guy, and he'd been over in the UK for 4 weeks and elsewhere in Europe for a couple of weeks just on a holiday. And he went home, saw his family and everything like that. And he was really, when he spoke to me, he was really quite worried. And he's quite worried about the economic system, and he's quite worried about, hey, we're on the precipice of World War III. It's about to be a nuclear annihilation, and I'm not ready. And I need a plan. I need to do something. And he's like a big advocate of crypto. I've got like a huge swath of money in crypto. And I said, dude, you know, you're an accountant, like a senior accountant. You should know better. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, are here. They're being rolled out at a high level. And if you haven't seen that episode, folks, on the episode that we've done recently, if you're listening to this at the podcast, it's episode 178, where we talk about central bank digital currencies. And they're being rolled out at a high level, at a World Bank level, which will soon filter down to government levels and ultimately to our mobile phones. And if you've got Bitcoin, if you've got Ethereum, if you've got Ripple or whatever you've got, that's going to be completely outlawed. And he said to me, how do you think that that's going to happen? And I said, well, you can have as much crypto as you want. The thing that you're not going to be able to do is to swap your crypto for Australian dollars on the Binance exchange and withdraw it to your bank account, because the government will just go over there and they'll flick the switch and turn the SWIFT system off on Binance. No more withdrawals. You can't do that anymore. You need to use our cryptocurrency. You need to use our blockchain. You need to use our CBDCs. And that's how we're going to communicate. And that's how we're going to make it all happen for you. And he was like, there's a revelation for him. He'd never heard of CBDCs. And he's like, oh my God, I didn't know.
Really? An accountant?
Yeah. Okay. And I said to him, look, man, the fact is, you're 100% right about Bitcoin. It's the only crypto, and it's the number one way to protect your anonymity, and would fix all of the finance problems on planet Earth. Fixes them all. But the problem is, no person in power will ever relinquish power. And here we are at the point of de-dollarisation and the collapse of the fiat system, because no fiat system has ever survived. It's collapsing. It's going away. And there's only one alternative, CBDCs. Because we have an alternative with Bitcoin and any other crypto that's out there that we could use, but the governments don't want to know about it because they can't control it and they can't regulate it. So it's scary stuff, man. There it is. The gold and silver, baby. Just the physical gold and silver is what matters.
Have you, and you know about Operation Choke Point, right? Where the government doesn't like competition. Okay, especially when it comes to the monetary. This is about control. These CBDCs, this is about control. It's not so much about the money. It's about control. They want to control your lives. And when you have a fiat currency in your hand, you can do a transaction anonymously that they wouldn't know about. They don't like that. They want to know exactly what you're spending your money on, and they want to control what you spend your money on. And when you have stuff like this, they can't control it. Right?
Exactly.
But Operation Choke Point, because cryptocurrencies, they offer up an alternative for people. Well, the government can't have that. Well, they can't really go after Bitcoin. Bitcoin is decentralized. It's out there in the ether. It's an immutable code. It's sitting on people's hard wallets, and it's out there. However, to access your Bitcoin, you do still need exchanges. You need a Coinbase or a Binance or a Kraken. You need an on-ramp and an off-ramp. So that's what the government is going after, one by one.
I'll just switch them off.
Yeah, they'll find ways to shut them down. So that is where Bitcoin has its Achilles heel, is not the product itself, but the on-ramps and off-ramps to Bitcoin. Anyway, yeah.
So I would just add and close out this little segment here by saying people could be watching this and listening to this going, you blokes are crazy. As if they would ever do that. You blokes are crazy. But I want to remind the viewers and the listeners of something that happened in 1933. In fact, it's almost to the day. On the 5th of June, 1933, do you know what happened, Ed?
Yeah, they outlawed gold.
Say that
30
again, so people can
Yeah, they
really
outlawed
grasp that.
gold.
They
Through
outlawed.
it was an executive order. Roosevelt, who a lot of people consider, a hero. I think he was a villain.
Yes.
But yeah.
History doesn't repeat itself, but history rhymes. It sounds the same. Yeah. Are they going to outlaw gold in the 21st century here, like 70 years later? No, I don't think so. It's just not possible to do that. But the reality is they could easily outlaw crypto. They could easily get rid of Bitcoin. And it's not in the way that you'd think. They don't wave a big stick. They just turn the SWIFT system off. That's how they sanction Russia. That's how they sanction every other country in the world that they don't like. And in the Western governments, and the US dollar is the centralized dollar of the world, the reserve currency of the world. They control all of the finance. All of the settlements go through New York. So we just turn off all of people's access to there. It all goes away. It's a really, really interesting time in history. All right. Good job, Ed. A little bit lazy on the front end there with your video, but I'll take it.
Sorry, man.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Okay. All right.
Get out of the stream, will you? I'm going to do my little presentation and tell everybody about what's going on with NATO and what happened. All of the allies met yesterday in Germany, in Ramstein in Germany. So this is something that happens once a month. They've been doing them via Zoom meetings, but yesterday everybody met up in the meeting. You can see there. And before that, Stoltenberg, the boss of NATO, actually went to Kyiv for the first time, and he went and met his little mate Zelensky over there, which was, was it good, bad, indifferent? So one of the things that I wanted to highlight here, folks, and why it's such an important thing here. But before I talk about why that was such an important meeting, I just want to play a little video from Mark Milley, who's the boss of the military in the US. And Mark Milley was talking about what we are going to do to continue to support them. So let's play that video.
Since the early phases of this war, and for every month since, the United States has provided Ukraine with the capabilities to defend itself. And in conjunction with our allies and partners, we have delivered. This coalition will continue to provide vital training and additional capabilities for air defense and maneuver to enable Ukraine's ongoing fight. Air defense munitions, air defense capabilities, tank munitions, armored vehicle capabilities, artillery ammunition, artillery tubes and rockets, and spare parts remain critical as Ukraine protects its cities and expels the Russian menace from its territory. Our countries and the countries of Europe have pledged that Ukraine will have the capabilities it needs to execute their missions on their own timeline. And we have pledged that support for as long as it takes, as the Secretary just said. This week, the United States announced our latest security assistance package as part of our ongoing commitment to Ukraine. As we stand here today, the Ukrainian military continues to perform very well. Intense fighting in and around Bakhmut continues and has for several months. Russia is expending significant manpower for very little gain. Russia is intensifying indiscriminate shelling in Avdiivka and other cities and urban areas. And Russia continues to pay severely for its war of choice.
All right, folks, that's pretty much it. He didn't really say anything new or anything that you would expect. Everyone was expecting an announcement around fighter jets and fighter aircraft and whatnot, but that hasn't come yet. Although there seemed to be a little bit of a slip of the tongue from Jens Stoltenberg, who mentioned that we continue to provide ammunition, tanks, et cetera, and he said jets in there as well. But they haven't supplied any jets yet. They supplied, some of the other European countries have supplied their old hardware, the Polish MiG-29s. There's some other MiG-29s from some other countries that came across as well, but NATO hasn't supplied any jets. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of shine a light on, and part of the reason that this appointment and this meeting was so important, is because for a while now, the Ukraine has said that they want to be part of NATO, and NATO has pushed back on that and said, there's no chance that you're going to be part of NATO while there's a war going on. However, they've said that by June or July of this year, that NATO will provide a security guarantee to the Ukrainians. So in my view, that represents an existential threat to the Russians. And that's probably one of the biggest announcements that's not been spoken about. And the reason that it's not been spoken about is, for some reason, the journalists out there can't seem to join all of the dots as to why that's such a dangerous thing. And so let me try and join the dots for everybody out there. The Russians will only use nuclear weapons when there's an existential threat to their country, meaning if their organization and their federation is threatened by an external force, they then have the right to use nuclear weapons in a first strike. So if NATO have come out and said, you're not going to have a buffer zone between Poland and your border, meaning Ukraine, that's not your buffer zone. We're going to fold them into NATO and we're going to go right up against your border. That represents an existential threat to them. The whole reason that the Russians invaded was because of that, to turn Ukraine into a giant buffer zone to stop any more encroachment into their territory. And not that that was happening, but they didn't want any, they wanted a buffer zone from NATO. And now that NATO has come out and said, we're going to support you for as long as it takes, we're going to give you whatever you need for as long as it takes, it'll be on your timelines. I suspect that the counterattack won't go as well as what everybody thinks, because the Russians will just absorb it all. And then they'll just put more manpower on the front line. And we'll be right back to where we are today. After the Ukrainian blood has been spilt, the treasury is gone and all of the equipment has been destroyed. So I'm really worried about that, because what that then means is the Ukrainians throw up their hands and go, well, we tried. We're trying to do everything. They've got to get out of our country. They've got to leave. And then it's at that point NATO said, well, we said we're going to provide a security guarantee. Here comes our Air Force. And then as soon as the Air Force comes in there, the Russians are like, hey, that represents an existential threat to us. Just you saying that to us is a threat. Even if the Russians don't have the capability to fight back against the NATO air forces or to fight back against NATO ground troops that went into Ukraine, what they will do is they will strike those NATO bases on their territory, not in Ukraine, but the only way that they'll do it is with ballistic missiles that rain down from space with nuclear warheads on them. They'll fire one Sarmat missile from the middle of Russia. It'll deploy 50 warheads and hit every single military base in Europe in one go. One missile will destroy the whole of the NATO infrastructure in one foul swoop. So I'm really concerned about this, because the allies come out and say, we're going to support you for as long as it takes. You'll get everything that you need, and we will help you for as long as it takes. And that, in my view, represents an existential threat to Russia. And they haven't been so strong in their language. And Stoltenberg, in his speech that he gave with Zelensky in Kyiv, said that they've so far supplied more than $150 billion worth of hardware, which is an incredible amount of equipment and manpower and people. And they've trained literally tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. They've trained people on Patriot batteries to drive tanks, to be infantry soldiers, and a myriad of other things. And in my view, that is a really, really scary proposition. There's a lot that's happening there, but there's also a lot not being said about it, because people just don't understand how the Russian doctrine works. And when you look at the way that the Russians are behaving, their doctrine is the way they're behaving is exactly according to their doctrine. The way that they dig in, the way that they operate, the way that they expend troops, the way that they leave every man that's killed on the battlefield behind. We have the opposite, right? We leave no man or woman behind on the battlefield. But these Russian soldiers are killed at scale, and they're all just left dead on the battlefield. No one cares about them or anything like that. And they just keep throwing them into the meat grinder. And even Mark Milley just said now in that quick video that they're suffering huge casualties, and their capacity and ability to outsuffer us is far greater than our capacity to inflict damage on them. They're not going to stop because they lose 2,000 troops in one day. Imagine if we lost 2,000 troops in one day. There's just no way the support at home would stand for that. But that's happening on a weekly basis. There's 2,000 odd Ukrainians being killed every day. How many troops do they have on the front line? When I think of the Australian Army, and how many frontline battalions do we have? Infantry guys like me, not many. It's half a dozen or something like that. So if there's 6,000 to 10,000 Australian infantry guys out there like me, all ready and willing to get into the fight and to hook in and go for it, but the Russians on the other side would destroy all of that in a matter of a couple of weeks, then where would Australia be? We would be toast. And that's what I'm saying. My concern is that NATO come out and say there's a security guarantee. The Ukrainians are going to get rolled up eventually unless the counterattack actually works. And, I'll close out by saying that I've never wanted to be more wrong in my life. I never want to tell somebody else that they're wrong, but I also don't want to be wrong when I say things out loud. I want to say correct information. I don't want to give you misinformation or disinformation. And I'm not some sort of Russia bro saying the Russians are going to win. I'm on their side. We're on the wrong side of history. Any of that rubbish. What I'm saying to you is that if you look at Russian doctrine, and I've looked at it, a whole book on my shelf there behind me, and I've studied it, and I've looked at it, and you look at the way that they behave on the battlefield, and I can do that from 10,000 miles away on the other side of planet Earth, and I can do that from a 100,000-foot view of a battlefield as a pundit and a wannabe pundit to make that happen. And they're following their doctrine to the letter. one of the things that concerns me as well is there's a lot of Russian shipping activity in and around the North Sea. So you went away and destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline. I raise you. Yeah, I raise you. And what you're going to see is a series of hybrid warfare attacks that have plausible deniability. So these Russian ships are tracking around the North Sea, and there's all the software and tracking tools that you can see via AIS and where they are, what they're doing, and what's happening. And there's a lot of open source intelligence out there about that. But if they go away and cut off some of the internet cables, they cut off some of the power to the UK and to the EU, you're never going to know about it. And hybrid warfare like that is part of their doctrine. Remember, they're going to escalate to de-escalate, and the order of battle that they actually have is space cyber, then EMP, and now we go to air, sea, and land warfare. So we're still in the opening phases of this war, even though it's a year on, and we might start to see this cyber attack stuff happening, and then we'll see space happening. Remember, in the exercises that we do with NATO as us playing the Russian side, when we follow their doctrine, it always ends up in a nuclear war.
Yep.
But before we get there, we'll take out all the satellite-based assets and start cyber and hybrid warfare, which will turn everything off in the first week of the war. So if this gets really serious really quickly, and this NATO security guarantee is seen as an existential threat, that's the next level of this conflict. It comes outside of the borders of Ukraine. And we've already done that. We did that with Nord Stream, and that might happen in the North Sea to the Europeans as well. What do you think, Ed? It's a pretty scary time in history, man.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I want your opinion on two questions for you. So I think it's generally considered that America didn't lose the war in Vietnam militarily. It was a political loss. The public opinion at home shifted. It was so anti-war. It got to a point where America made a political decision to pull out. It wasn't a military loss. It was a political loss. Would you agree with that statement, or?
It was lost by the politicians, not lost by the soldiers. But what they did, so it's the culture that they set there. So I'd be happy to be corrected here, but of all the books that I've read and all the research that I've done, and I've done a lot of that because, you know, that was the war that I studied the most when I was a kid, right? Because that was the most recent thing as a kid growing up in the 1980s. And what I know about it is the politicians set the frame to tell the soldiers on the ground, what you need to do is to count all the dead Vietnamese soldiers. And the reason we want to do that is because it's a war of attrition. And in a war of attrition, we need to know how many of them we've destroyed versus how many we've got left. And the American soldiers on the ground would count what they thought was happening, but there was no way to get accurate information. And sometimes things were embellished. Sometimes they were undercounted.
Okay, well, that's a tactical thing. And you're right. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with that. But at the end there, the decision to pull out, it was a political decision because public opinion had turned so much against the war by them. That's why they pulled. They didn't pull out because the North Vietnamese had just won a big battle and we had to get out. Okay,
well, you can't keep showing on Walter Cronkite at 6 o'clock at night dead American soldiers and guys getting rolled up by enemy troops. You can't show that and think that public opinion is going to be in your favor.
Right.
The one thing that we do wrong in Western society with modern warfare is we don't show actually what's going on. If you just go over to Telegram, and I know you're new to Telegram, Ed, I'm going to start posting some of the things about the war in our new Telegram channel. And folks, make sure you follow us in Telegram. The link's in the description below, because if something ever happens here on YouTube, all of the content will be over there. But I'll start posting some real-time war footage in there, and you will see that your support for the war will go away quick smart, especially when you see war crimes being committed on a daily basis.
Well, okay. Well, just as we had the media back then against the war and put in the appropriate images on TV, the media today, they're supporting the administration, and so you're getting a lack of those kind of images, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, apparently there are many protests starting to pop up around the world, mostly in Europe, in Germany and France, that are anti-war, and these are NATO countries. So what do you think the chances are that NATO will start losing its appetite because of growing public disdain against this war. Do you think that could happen?
Yes, I absolutely think that could happen. And I think Putin knows that. And Putin's not going anywhere because it's his backyard. And neither are those Europeans, but the Europeans are being threatened by Putin. At some point, they're going to have to negotiate. Every conflict in human history has either ended with the enemy completely rolling you up and occupying you, or at negotiation. And I think it's a bit of a bridge too far to say that the Russians are going to be able to roll up and occupy Europe the way that the Soviets did after World War II. I think that's kind of a bridge too far.
Well, okay,
so get there.
So if you're Putin and you're seeing the protests starting to grow, wouldn't you be just prolonging it as much? Because the longer you wait, the more the citizens are going to do, in Western Europe, are going to do the work for you.
If I channel my inner Putin, I see you and I raise you. And that's what they do. They escalate to de-escalate.
Yeah.
And we've seen them do that in several ways. And that's where I say this is going to start spilling over outside the borders of Europe, and it'll spill over into the oceans. Yeah, and you'll see the cyber attacks, and they could easily shut down our satellite systems, our GPS systems, and a series of other things that we've got in space. Our space-based assets, they've demonstrated their ability to fire a missile from the ground to shoot down satellites, and it causes all sorts of havoc in space, and they don't care what happens as a result of that. All they care about is taking our eyes and ears away. And the vast majority of what we do from a targeting perspective is based on space-based assets. And the guy I was talking to yesterday about prepping and about nuclear war survival and what to do, he said, do you think we'd ever be a target? And I said, mate, any city on planet Earth that has an international airport has got at least 5 or 6 hydrogen bombs pointed at it right now. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah, man, if the shizzy hits the fizzy, as the saying goes, the enemy will take out Pine Gap in the middle of Australia. They'll take out Canberra, our political centres, centres of gravity. They'll take out Sydney Airport, Katoomba, Richmond, Williamtown, Tyndall, Amberley. All of those places will go. And Australia, when you look at the cities and the confinement of the cities, they're not very big places. And an airburst nuke that went off at 20,000 feet would annihilate all of those cities. But the target is not the cities. The target is the military installations. And they take those military installations off the table. And people don't understand that in order for the Russians to succeed, if you look at the rhetoric of what they say a world without Russia is not a world worth having. And they continuously have this nuclear rhetoric saying, we've got bigger and better weapons and we will destroy you all.
Oh, yeah. Putin mentions it every other day. He's mentioning his nuclear weapons. Where in America, we have a policy. It's a no-no to mention nuclear, right?
And that's the doctrine, right? Because a nuclear war should never be fought because it can never be won. That's why you guys never say that. But the reality is it's not just the Americans with nuclear weapons. And a lot of people forget that and don't talk about it. Israelis have got it. The French have got it. The Indians, the Pakistanis. There's a series of countries, the Brits as well, that have it. So the Russians seem to think that the nuclear war is just going to be with the Americans. And that's what the rhetoric is always there. But it's not. It's a combined force. But then I also think those turncoats, the French, are they actually going to back us? I don't know. They couldn't sort themselves out in World War One. They needed help in World War Two.
Flip of the coin.
I don't know.
Okay, and my last question is, okay, so the stated objective by all of our politicians who are in favor of this war, as well as Zelensky himself, is regime change in Russia. They say that's what they want. They want regime change in Russia. And that's why we're supporting Ukraine, because we want regime change in Russia. So they want Putin gone. So,
well, if
Putin's gone, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but I wanted to get this on camera for the folks. So if Putin's gone, who takes his space? Who takes his place, and to what effect?
Yeah, Dmitry Medvedev steps up into that because he was the only other president of Russia since Putin's been around since the year 2000 because of the way their rules work. And then they changed the constitution. So he could have an infinite term, be a leader for life, like Xi Jinping, so to speak. But
so in other words, democracy isn't going to break out if we get rid of Putin.
Well, there's a bunch of breakaway republics inside of the Russian Federation that don't like Putin and they don't like being governed. They want to be their own countries. But the reality is that's not going to happen. And that's what I'm saying to you is the Russian rhetoric, especially from Medvedev, who would take over, who would be Putin's successor if something happened to Putin, if he died of natural causes or he was killed, then he would take over. He's on the record saying that there's no world without Russia in it. And without Russia in it, there is no world. So his rhetoric is really inflammatory, and he's far more hawkish than what Putin is. Putin is some person that always tries to continuously use history to teach everybody a lesson, but Medvedev just says, we've got nuclear weapons and we'll destroy you, stop it. And that's a big stick that he waves at everybody all the time. And everyone knows in NATO, they're like, whoa, we know that he can do that. We know that that potentially is going to be a problem for us. So we need to maybe dial back our rhetoric. And then, but the reality is this tit for tat escalation doesn't lead anywhere. And what it does is it highlights and shows to me that war is a complete and total failure of humanity. And once again, you know, I was thinking about what am I going to report on today, what I'm going to talk about. There's a series of things I want to talk about, but I'm like, I can't not talk about this because these are the biggest things that are happening in our society. And the thing that you raised is probably the second biggest thing that's happening in our society, the de-dollarisation, you know, of the USD going away, hyperinflation, all that money coming home to the US. These things affect us, and you don't realize, but they do. And the geopolitical nature of it might not be something that people are interested in talking about or understanding because it's too complicated. But ultimately, you go to the shops and you go and buy a bag of groceries, and suddenly you're $60 out of pocket. And I'm holding 2 bags of groceries, going, what? $60 for that? There's nothing in it. You know, there's some apples and oranges and some dinner in there and a loaf of bread and a box of eggs. Like, really? That was $60? Well, the cost of living is just running away. Inflation is here. And, you know, is that because of the war in Ukraine? Is that because of what's going on in geopolitically? No, it's got to do with the complete and total incompetence of our reserve bank system and the politicians that actually run and govern it. It does affect you. This stuff does affect you on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. All right, Ed, let's throw to you, mate, and go ahead. And what do you got up for us next? What's next?
Okay, next on the list is cashless society. How cash is disappearing, and this is a separate topic from de-dollarization. De-dollarization refers to the fact that countries around the world are starting to use other forms of currency to settle international transactions besides the dollar, and that will lead to inflation. But now, on a more practical level, and this is all tied together with the CBDCs we talked about yesterday. So there is a theme here that every little subcategory here does warrant its own topic. So let's talk about what's going on with these guys. All right, and if you don't mind, after this segment, after this video, could you please in the comment section below, please share your experiences with cash. Are you having a hard time getting money out of your bank? Actual cash? Are you finding that your local merchants are not accepting cash anymore? We would like to hear your stories. All right, so let me show you a couple clips.
Taken another step towards a cashless society. A big bank has confirmed customers in some locations can no longer withdraw money over the counter as branches continue to wind back services.
The latest figures on ATMs shows the number of machines has more than halved from almost 14,000 back in 2017 to around 6,000 in the middle of last year.
Has accelerated Australia closer to a cashless society. In fact, so many of us stopped using cash in the first half of 2020 that authorities stopped issuing $5 and $10 notes.
Digital wallets and smartwatches. A lot of people are predicting that Australia will become a cashless society within years. Thank you. One major advantage of cash is that my transactions are private, so only the boss here knows what I bought and how much I spent.
Australia is set to be number 4 in the list of countries who will lead in the cashless phenomenon, following Sweden as number 1, Denmark as number 2, and Hong Kong as number 3.
Now, one of the major changes that has quickly morphed into our daily lives during this COVID-19 is cashless spending. The supermarkets, the retailers, even the local fruit and veggie fella, they're telling us to tap or swipe no cash. We won't take it.
69% of Australians actually agree that Australia will be a cashless society by 2031.
Does cash still hold the same value?
Cash is still relevant, but cash is no longer king.
Nearly a third of U.S. adults say they make no purchases using cash during a typical week.
Sweden is fed up with cash. It's a hassle to carry around, it can easily be stolen or misplaced, and frankly, no one is using it anymore.
Your cash
is about to become trash as we enter into a cashless society in 2023 and a digital dollar that's being introduced to save our society.
15 years. Great to see you, Frank. Welcome home.
You just have to unmute there, Ed.
All right. So, Rob, what the hell is going on in Australia?
You know, I really like that you had the Aussie theme on there because I think I'm going crazy. There's no ATMs. The banks are closed. No, the actual media. I don't see mainstream media. I don't watch it, right? The only mainstream media I see is on YouTube because my TV is just not plugged into an antenna in the wall. So I don't even know where the antenna is in this apartment, to be honest with you. I've never plugged it in. We've got streaming TV, right? We just watch it there. What's going on in Australia? I think Australians are just lazy. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And when you, I look at that and I look at it objectively and just kind of shrug my shoulders and go, well, yeah, it isn't just easier to go like that with my watch or to tap my phone. Yeah, it's easier. It's definitely convenient, but then every single thing that I do is tracked.
Exactly.
And that's the problem that we have with society, right? Is all of this wonderful technology and these really great things that we have are designed to actually help us and make our lives better. But the people that are behind it are using it in a way to control us.
Yep.
The idea of a conservative government, the idea of the conservative side of politics is to make government smaller, be smaller. You don't need such a big, giant bureaucracy. And a lot of services that the government provide would be better off offloaded to private industry because private industry for profit would be way more efficient. It would reduce the bloat, it would reduce that, it would improve services. There's so many things that would do. But we seem to be going to the opposite side of thing in Western society where government seems to be expanding and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But I also, maybe I'll push back here a little bit, Ed, and, see what you think. If you were a politician and you were in charge of fiscal policy and you had to do these things and you look at it, one of the reporters there said it pretty well. He said, they're training us to get rid of cash, but I don't think so. I think it's just because people are lazy and I've just got my phone and I'll just use it. It's the same thing. What's the difference? I don't see any difference. And I don't care if they're tracking me. I'm not doing anything wrong anyway.
It's one thing to give people an option, where they can choose. But what's going on at the banks is they're taking away your options. They cut the ATM. They cut the ATMs in half in less than a year, and it's not just Australia, by the way. I just put an inordinate amount of Australian clipped in there because of Rob.
Well, it's every country in the world, right? It's happening in every country.
Well, you're number 4 according to that article,
to the list,
to the clip.
Yeah.
Sweden is number 1. But I mean, so giving people an option is one thing if they choose to do it. And in the free market, people can decide if there is one private outfit that's particularly egregious in selling your information and giving your information to, you can fire them and go to a private organization that doesn't do it. So competition, people have the freedom to, and people they'll gravitate toward the ones that are going to take care of them, right? But when they take away those options and force you on the systems, then the government powers be, they have a monopoly because you don't have a choice. You have to go through the rails that they provide for you in order to live your life. And if you want to go to a garage sale and buy some gadget at a garage sale with cash, so you should have the freedom to do that.
Well, they give you the ability through the banking apps here in Australia to easily transfer money to each other. So, I want to buy this microphone or this, audio equipment that I've got.
Yeah,
here.
but for
$500.
But for people like me who don't want the government knowing what I'm doing in any aspect of my life, I want to be able to use this stuff.
Here in Australia, there's one thing that you didn't report on there, which is not being said, and it's one of the unspoken truths of modern Australian society is in the last 12 or 18 months, they changed the rules about owning a company. So in the US, you have LLCs. In Australia, we have the equivalent called proprietary limited company. And they came out and said that in order for you to continue operating your business as a proprietary limited company, you must identify yourself through the government systems. So this is the enforcement of the government digital ID system, where now I know who you are, I know what your business does, I know everything about your taxation situation, I can see all of your bank accounts, and I can also see every transaction that you're doing in your business life and your personal life. Your medical records via Medicare are now connected to your government ID. Your welfare payments, if you're entitled to any, are also connected in there as well. And by the way, if you don't submit to what we're saying, you can no longer operate as a proprietary limited
There you
company.
go. CBDCs. Complete control
it's here in Australia.
of your lives. You know, the chairman of the Bank of Britain, the Bank of, what do they call it? Yeah, the Bank of UK. Yeah, he came out the other day saying that their objective is to have a cashless society in the UK by 2030. That's not very far away. That's the objective. No more cash at all. A cashless society. If our children want to see a dollar bill, they're going to have to go to a museum. And that is sad. I mean, and just think of what this is going to do to Hollywood, man. Because now, you know, all those movies where the criminals, they're carrying around suitcases of cash.
Why work?
What are they going to do?
They're carrying around a USB stick with a crypto on it that they can't access. That they can't withdraw.
You want to count it? You want to count the chip? Yeah, everything could be on a chip. They say, I don't want that. As soon as I plug it in, the government's going to know that I got it.
All right, let's round out this show. I've got something a little bit funny here on the end of the show that I think you'll really like, Ed. I want to talk about cost of living here in Australia and actually what's happening. So during the most recent 2-year period, March 2020 to 2022, the CPI rose 1.1% in the first 12 months, but 5.1% in the second. The rise of 5.1 was the highest annual rise reported since the introduction of the GST in 2000. So we have a huge cost of living crisis here in Australia, and we've had a change of government here in Australia as well, from a conservative side of politics to a more liberal side of politics, what I call the socialist here in Australia, the social welfare. So the Labor Party and the Greens Party have a coalition here in Australia, and all they want to talk about is climate change and whether a boy is a girl or a girl is a boy, and these strange ideological things that are going on. Meanwhile, regular Australians are suffering under a cost of living crisis. And when you look at the signature policy that they have for this year, they're running a referendum to change the Constitution of Australia, and they're calling it the Voice to Parliament. When you Google, what is the Voice? What is the Voice to Parliament and how would it work? The Voice would advise the Australian Parliament and government on matters relating to social, spiritual and economic well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Essentially, what they want to do is create a two-tier government, and they want to create... It's a joke. It's a strange thing that's going on. There's nothing wrong with recognizing Indigenous people, and there's nothing wrong with adding something like that to the Constitution, but to add a layer of bureaucracy that's already there. And the irony is that the bureaucracy already exists. There's already a series of government departments that are already in place that govern these things. And we have these things happening at a state level as well already, which is really strange. So I want to show you a video, and I'm going to share my screen here with an Australian politician. She's an Aboriginal woman. Her name's Jacinta Price, and she's on the no side of the argument. And just this little soundbite I'll play for you really helps you to understand why these things are such a problem. And what's happening is the Australian government, the Australian leadership, the politicians that we have are absolute freaking morons. There's a huge cost of living crisis here in Australia. They're breaking just about every election promise that they've made to us. And we have huge spikes in energy prices. Meanwhile, they're closing down power stations, but they're concentrating on a voice to Parliament. None of this stuff, none of it actually affects everyday Australians. And so the government is saying, look over here, while they're doing something over here. And I don't know what that something is. But the look over here bit, trying to distract you, is with this. And so let me just play this video with Jacinta. I'll make sure that it's only playing at 1.25 because I listen to everything a bit faster. So check it out.
And this country certainly provides that opportunity for you. My mother could be born under a tree if her first language is not English, and she can grow up to become a Minister of the Crown. Well, then I could certainly step up and be a councillor in my community. That's for sure. I'm obliged to fight for some of our most vulnerable people, those that are in remote communities, those whose first language is not English. That is what I have done, and that is what I will continue to do to improve the lives of some of our most marginalised Australians. That's what keeps me going. What's important to me.
So I just want to stop it there, folks, because what she's saying is like, yeah, of course, who would not agree with that? And anybody that is a politician, her mum was a politician. She became a councillor in Alice Springs. She grew up in Alice Springs. She's from a blended family, and wait till you see what she says next. It makes a lot of sense. But so far, it's very agreeable. She seems very reasonable, and it's really smart what she's saying.
Is that we don't divide ourselves along the lines of race in this country. I don't want to see my family divided along the lines of race, because we are a family of human beings, and that's the bottom line.
Our family is a blended thing. Our family is what Australia is. And a line going through my family, I won't stand for that.
So that's her husband.
I won't stand for that.
Later this year, politicians will be asking us to vote on a major change to our constitution. They want to establish a so-called voice to parliament. This is a really big deal. The constitution is the rule book for governing the country, and they want the rules to change. This is a massive change, and it will mean that some Australians are treated differently based on the colour of their skin. I'll be voting no, because this will not unite us, this will divide us.
So that's what politicians in Australia want us to concentrate on. So Jacinta Price has just been appointed the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs and has only been in Parliament for 12 months. So there's a really serious problem going on in Australia where politicians are concentrating on something like that. And I get it. There's 1,000 things that have to be done in a country, but when there's a cost of living crisis that's been the highest since the year 2000, so the cost of living is higher for the last 23 years, and politicians want us to focus on some constitutional change. It costs millions of dollars to run a referendum here in Australia, and then to make those changes. And typically we wouldn't run a referendum unless we knew it was going to pass. I can remember one that happened saying, do we want to decouple from the monarchy here in Australia? Do we not want to be the Commonwealth of Australia? Do we want to be the Republic? And the answer was an overwhelming no. And it was an absolute joke. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. But the problem that we have is that there's literally no explanations about how it's going to work or what's going to happen, because if the yes vote gets up, then they're going to actually put everything together and say, this is how it's going to work. But nobody knows how it's going to currently work, which is a really, really strange thing. So they want us to vote on something. They want to have a referendum about something, but we don't know what that something is or what the outcome will be other than constitutional change. So it's a really odd thing that's going on. And dividing a country and dividing a constitution by the color of somebody's skin seems like something out of the 1750s. It's a very strange thing. It doesn't even seem like something that is even appropriate in today's day and age. Aboriginal people are not repressed. Aboriginal people and Indigenous people are not suffering in society. There's only a percentage of people that are suffering in society, and it doesn't matter what color your skin is or where you're from on planet Earth. If you're having a hard time, you're having a hard time. And we live in a welfare state here in Australia, and there's a large percentage of our budget that goes to paying for welfare. If we set the conditions, reduce the taxes, and give people a better opportunity and reduce the energy prices here in Australia, there'd be more opportunity for jobs. And there's always going to be people that don't want to participate in society. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just how it is. It's just part of society. And everybody's not going to get on the gravy train and be in the luckiest country in the world and create a huge amount of abundance and wealth for themselves and have their house and live the Australian dream. That's just a fantasy. Everybody doesn't want that. That's not for everybody. But the reality is the government creates the conditions that enable this welfare state to continue, which is really strange. So I show you Jacinta Price, and I show you that because she represents real conservative values. She represents Australians, and she represents her constituents in a way that you would expect a politician to behave. She's really well spoken. She's really well thought out, and she's very methodical in the way she goes about things. And she's very good at dismantling idiot green leftist journalists in the process. And she's attacked in the media for it. And if she was attacking men the way that they attack her, and the shoe was on the other foot. Just the behavior in this country and the hypocrisy of the mainstream media in this country is unbelievable. And it shows me that we're governed by absolute morons. The leadership of your country, and particularly my country, are absolute morons. It's the bureaucracy, or maybe you could call it another way, the deep state behind it, that is actually holding it all together. And Jacinta is an example of somebody who came from bureaucracy. So she worked for council in Alice Springs, so she understands how government works and understands that when you're appointed to a position of leadership, that you have to work with the bureaucracy. You can't come out and make these crazy claims and create these crazy policies that cause all sorts of discourse in society, which is what we're seeing. And today, and your segments were about exactly that. So I want to round out today's show by sharing some other things with you. And I want to use a juxtaposition between Jacinta Price and this politician here. You might have heard of her. Her name is Lydia Thorpe. She is she identifies as an Indigenous person, and I have to use the right language there in fear of being marked or mocked or something. But she's recently left the Greens Party of Australia. And what I'll say to the people that are watching this is, if you vote for a politician like this, if you understand that this person is responsible for creating and passing legislation in Australia, and you think that her behavior is acceptable, you made your bed, so you have to lie in it. So the people that voted for her in Victoria, this is what you get. This is the result of that. And for some reason, we seem to have lost all standards when it comes to Australian politicians. And we're all so gutless because, first of all, she's a woman. And next of all, she's an Indigenous woman. And nobody's calling her out. There are a couple of journalists, and I'll show you a funny video in a sec, that are calling her out. But I'm going to call it out that her behavior is completely unbecoming of somebody in a position of leadership, somebody that represents constituents and somebody that represents the Australian people that have actually taken the time to consider her policies and to vote for her. Now she's gone away and she's no longer a member of the Greens Party. She's now an independent. All the people that voted for her, nobody wanted your independent policies. They wanted your Greens policies. And now you're off on some tangent doing your own thing over there, which is really strange. Let me just show you, Ed, how this woman behaves. And I can show you a montage of things, but there's no better way to show you this montage other than to present it. And I'll be a little bit lazy like you were today, and I'll show you exactly how this woman behaves, and no better way to do it than to play this video for you, because it's funny as hell. So I'll play a little bit of it. I'll speed it up so it's a bit faster for us. It's funny as hell. You're going to get a kick out of this.
Senator Lydia Thorpe has received a lifetime ban from a Melbourne strip club, which raises the big question: shouldn't the Australian Parliament at least try to match the standards of suburban strip joints? I mean, even strip clubs have standards. Lydia Thorpe's behaviour now precludes her from entering a venue where women strip naked on a pole, but is not so bad that she's precluded from sitting in federal parliament deciding public policy. The independent senator for outrage was filmed at 3 a.m. abusing a group of men outside Maxine's Gentlemen's Club in Brunswick at the weekend. The club's general manager, David Ross, said the problem started when Senator Thorpe began harassing his clients.
She was being argumentative and approaching some of our European heritage clients and telling them they'd stolen her land.
Well, you've got a feel for the clients at Maxine's. I mean, it's got to be difficult to enjoy a lap dance while being paraded for stealing Aboriginal land. That's kind of a mood killer. Maxine's advertised that they, quote, showcase the most glamorous girls. Well, they can now add, and if you're really lucky, a rampaging federal senator. According to the club's website, Maxine goes out of her way to provide a fun, laid-back nightclub environment. It's anything but a typical strip club, the website boasts. Indeed, typical strip clubs don't include the option of having your genitalia mocked by former Greens, now independent senator for Victoria, Lydia Thorpe.
You know what I'm saying to you? You know what I'm saying? And you are a racist. Oh, penis.
Can you imagine the outrage if the male politician was caught mocking women's genitalia? He would be shamed out of Parliament faster than you can say Peter Slipper.
Because I believe that given the controversy which has occurred in recent times,
these people are absolute
in the interest of the Parliament, that I should take the course of action that I have personally chosen to take.
What an idiot.
Peter Slipper resigned as the Speaker of the Australian Parliament after text messages revealed he had used coarse language to describe women's genitals in an exchange with a former staffer. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, come on, James, Senator Thorpe will surely realise her conduct is unbecoming of an elected official and so will do the honourable thing and resign.
What kind of person do you think I am?
Right, so she won't be resigning then. Anyway, having penis-shamed men outside Maxine's strip club, Senator Thorpe then proceeded to racially vilify the men because, well, it was that kind of night.
All I want to say to the black brothers there, and anyone that we're fighting, any black man that stands with a white little like that, you should all get fighting too. They've been oppressed all that life in this country, and you let this little dog...
You can imagine the outrage if a white politician was filmed speaking that way to black members of the public.
Is that racism? Is that racism?
Yes, Senator, yes, it is. When you refer to Caucasians as effing white little C's, that's a pretty clear example of racism. Now, I know what you're all thinking. She's mocked these guys' genitals, she's racially vilified them, but she wouldn't go even further and threaten them, would she? I mean, she's a federal senator. Federal senators don't go around making threats and trying to intimidate members of the public.
What kind of person do you think I am?
The kind of person who goes around making threats and trying to intimidate members of the public.
You are marked.
So we've got a federal senator who confessed to having been in a relationship with a former member of a bikie gang, telling members of the public they are marked. It's ironic, you know. Only 8 weeks ago, Senator Thorpe was telling the ABC that she needed to be protected from threats and intimidation.
I think that the Parliament failed to protect me. If we go back to Jan 26 last year, I've had the far right threaten me. There's been subsequent threats publicly by this far right terrorist group. And I think that that's just the reality of what it's like for a black woman in a public space who's got some power.
And what of the reality of what it's like for Caucasian members of the public who want to enjoy nothing more than the simple pleasures of a pole dance without being marked by a black woman in public who's got some power? To say that Senator Thorpe is familiar with controversy is a little bit like saying Jimi Hendrix is familiar with the guitar. Now, time doesn't permit us to play you her top 10 hits, but we've done an exclusive poll, by which I mean I've made an executive decision, and we've come up with Lydia Thorpe's top 3 greatest hits. Coming in at number 3, her outrageous pledge of allegiance when she holds a defiant fist in the air as she joins the government.
That I will be faithful and I bear true allegiance to the colonising Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Senator Thorpe.
Coming in at number 2, her forced removal from Sydney's gay and lesbian Mardi Gras after she attempted to demonstrate that no one, not even the LGBTQ community, are bigger victims than her. And coming in at number 1, Senator Lydia Thorpe flopping to the ground and then scurrying away on hands and knees after attempting to interrupt the Let Women Speak event outside Parliament House. But back to the events outside the Gentlemen's Club in the early hours of Sunday morning. It took an anonymous strip club patron to ask the question every journalist should have been asking from the moment Lydia Thorpe entered the Senate.
You can all get too.
Someone get in Parliament like you.
Good question. Would somebody please give that guy a job in the Canberra Press Gallery? Senator Teflon brushed aside the latest controversy, saying, "It's sad people are utilising whatever they can to drag me down when we're trying to discuss important issues in this country." Well, if people are trying to drag down Senator Thorpe, they are utilising her own behaviour. As for being dragged down, when even a strip club decides your conduct is unbecoming, well, you're already at the bottom.
Excellent.
Man, oh man, I tell you, like, it's some funny stuff, right? It's hard to believe that that's somebody who's been elected. Normally you think of somebody who's elected as an old guy like me or you in a suit and behaving badly and talking in parliamentary doublespeak that you can't understand about policies that you have no idea about. But this woman is literally the bottom of the barrel in Australian society.
World is changing. Oh, we have our share of people like that too. I mean, how the hell do these people get elected?
Well, they get elected based on the policies of the party that they represent.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And in her case, right, the Greens Party, and like them or hate them, and whatever policies that they've got, that's what people are voting for because that's what they believe. I like the Greens policies. That's what I want, and she happens to be the person representing. Okay, cool. I'll vote for her. I actually really like her as well. One really interesting thing, Ed, she's on the no side of the voice argument, which is a good idea as well. So she's an advocate for no, which I firmly sit in that stance there because I don't think it's a good idea to divide society in any way, shape, or form.
Why? I'm all for it.
You want to divide society?
I want the idiots over there, and just stay away from me. You stay over there. Yeah. Leave me alone.
What happens if you get divided and you're in Lydia's camp?
Well, in America, I can move. It's freedom of movement, right? I'll get up and move. The problem is when you don't have an exit ramp, when they're all bad choices. That's when things get depressing. That's when you start looking at, boy, Romania is looking pretty good. You
don't want to get locked up like Andrew Tate, locked up without trial or investigation for 6 months. For heaven's sake, that's ridiculous. All right, let's wrap this show up, ladies and gentlemen. If you like what you saw on today's show, please reach out to Ed and I. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show and smack that bell as well. And don't forget to come on over and follow us on on Telegram, and make sure you go ahead and download the podcast on Spotify as well. We want to make sure that you've got a backup to everything that's going on here in case we get shut down or censored here on YouTube. We've got those alternative sources out there. All right. Got any closing remarks, Ed?
Just please give us a like and please leave a comment if you don't. Give us a comment. Comments really help the algo. Let's fire up this brand new YouTube channel.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks so much, Ed. We'll see you tomorrow, mate. It's bye for now.
All right. Thanks, Robbie.